Contract negotiations are done, the deal is signed, and the Chargers have given Rashawn Slater an historic extension, and that means that Justin Herbert will have one of the best tackle duos in the NFL for at least the next 4 seasons.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers for 10 seasons now, but this is our 8th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Daniel, Jim Harbaugh said that offensive linemen are weapons, and they just rewarded one of their biggest weapons of them all with Rashawn Slater getting a massive extension, one that is richly deserved. And Andre James has now entered the chat. For the longest time was only Bradley Bozeman and Zion Johnson, but now it looks like Andre James is starting to push to be the starting center of this football team, and another under-the-radar player is starting to sprout up and make a name for himself on offense, and that is the speedster Derius Davis.
Yeah, man, every time you kind of ride him off into a special team-specific role, he kind of flashes and makes you wonder what his kind of purpose could be just on the offense in general. But today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. And David, we have to start with the big news coming out of Sunday, which is that the contract stalemate between the Chargers and Rashawn Slater is finally over. A little bit of a minor injury / hold-in situation apparently happening at Chargers training camp because Rashawn Slater has not practiced for at least 4 or 5 practices in a row. I expect we'll be seeing him back on the field soon, David, because he has now reportedly signed a 4-year, $114 million contract extension that keeps him under contract until the 2029 season. And also, he gets a record $92 million of that guaranteed, which is crazy because Tristan Wirfs got a 5-year deal and didn't even get $92 million guaranteed. The Chargers putting their money where their mouths are, and I think that what it comes down to for me, David, was just that if you want to be this culture and this team that wants to be an offensive line team, even with some of the other kind of speculative moves they've made on the interior, it's impossible to say you're going to be that kind of team if you don't reward someone as good as Rashawn Slater.
100%, no question about it. Rashawn Slater has been an absolute treat to watch. Been a true technician as soon as he has stepped foot on the football field in the National Football League. And he's not just a fantastic pass protector. He is a dominant run blocker as well. He is one of the true best offensive linemen in the league, and now he gets paid as such at the top of the market, resetting the offensive lineman market for the NFL, and it's absolutely deserved. He's in the peak of his career right now at 26 years old. There's really nothing but the sky being the limit for what he is capable of. So happy this deal is done now that we can put that behind us. Don't have to worry about it being a distraction. And yes, the Chargers now definitely have one of the best tackle tandems in the NFL, bar none.
And when you have somebody that is a top, 3 player pretty much unanimously at their position, this is the deal that they get, right? They reset the market. And I mean, he is, one of the guys that says, I got next after Trent Williams rides off into the sunset as the best left tackle in the NFL. It's him, Trent Williams, Jordan Mailata. That's pretty much it. And that's why he gets a deal of this nature. And I mean, just to put it in perspective for his career, 11 career sacks and 2,213 pass blocking snaps over his career. That's in 51 career games, only 11 sacks. And I mean, has missed time, 17 games he's missed over 4 seasons, but 14 of those were due to a torn bicep in 2022. And I think the most encouraging thing about Rashawn Slater is even over the last couple of years when he hasn't been at 100%, he still produces, he still toughs it out, and he is still a good player and much better than the alternative if he's able to get out on the field. But I do think that for Rashawn Slater to get this deal, it does kind of have the other ramifications of, okay, now you get your starting lineup together for training camp. now you have all these things that can get out of the way, as you said, including, okay, now he can get some chemistry potentially with Bradley Bozeman if that's the way they go at left guard. But it kind of pushes Trey Pipkins back to the second team offense. Like, there are other parts of this that really kind of get put into place by Rashawn Slater being back on the football field, which I'm sure we'll see very, very soon. And the other part of this is it moving around some money for the Chargers opens up another around $5 million in salary cap for them this year, David, which gives them about $30 million in space and some flexibility going in case they want to add something else.
Yeah, no, I mean, plenty of operating space for the Chargers, and I think this was something we kind of figured was going to happen whenever, he had a $19 million cap hit or around there, with the, the option that he was going to be playing under, that fifth-year option. But, now that he has the big contract, it actually reduces the cap hit a little bit, giving the Chargers that much more operating cap space, which is still quite extensive. They really can go out and kind of make whatever move they need to make quite comfortably, no matter who it is or what they want to do. They have some real flexibility now, which is really, really interesting because the Chargers still might have a couple of places that they can upgrade the roster. So we'll see what happens throughout the rest of training camp. And, if they feel compelled to make a move, they can definitely do that at this time.
Yeah, and I think when you're looking at, potential trade prospects and things even of that nature, because there's not probably someone on the free agent market that's going to command that kind of money, but it lets you be one of those few teams that could bring on a bigger contract if one becomes available, a disgruntled star that potentially can change the course of your season. You have that, and with Joe Ortiz, you're feeling right now, even at this point in the offseason, that the moves are not done yet. But I think most importantly with this move, David, it shows the Chargers' commitment to giving Justin Herbert the best protection possible, at least on the outside, by locking up, one of the best tackle duos in the NFL. Like I said before, I mean, it's basically, Jordan Mailata at left tackle and Lane Johnson, obviously, is his right tackle, pretty unanimously the best tackle duo. But
yeah,
Rashawn Slater, Joe Alt, that feels like the next duo up and coming. And to have seen the tackles that were in front of Phillip Rivers for so long, to see how long the Chargers not only search for their, franchise left tackle, but their franchise right tackle as well, to know that these two dudes, Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater, will be together through at least 2028 is a great feeling, knowing what we know covering this team as long as we have.
Yeah, we've seen the carousel of players that got cycled through left tackle and right tackle, and a couple of guys were able to kind of make some cameos and stay for a short time, little while, and was able to do some positive things, but nobody was able to lock down the position really until Rashawn Slater stepped onto the field at left tackle, and you knew it right away. I mean, when they got those reports in practice of him being able to, show up and really hold his own against Joey Bosa, you're like, okay, we really got something here with Rashawn Slater. And obviously now we know he's one of the premier players in the NFL. And I think with Joe Alt, you saw all of the potential switching to a brand new position at the NFL level, going over from left tackle to right tackle and being one of the premier right tackles in the league. And now having a full year off season under his belt to completely dedicate himself to playing that right tackle position. The Chargers truly have some massive weapons on each side protecting Justin Herbert, and it is a beautiful thing to see that these guys are going to be playing together for at least the next 4 years.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that the Chargers, now have a guy that Jim Harbaugh called a future Hall of Famer and a guy that Greg Roman called a future first-team All-Pro, and the other guy is the one that just got a $114 million contract, because that's what they've been saying about Joe Alt so far this summer. So to have those guys locked up when you've saw, Phillip Rivers, to name some of those cameos, the King Dunlaps and Russell Okung's and Sam Tevye and Storm Norton, Joe Barksdale, Chris Hairston, Trent Scott, DJ Fluker, a Brian Bulaga signing. Like, there was such a revolving door, and even when they had, a good season here, and you're like, okay, maybe they answered it, they hadn't. And with Rashawn Slater, that question's been answered. With Joe Alt, you feel about as good as you could about that 1 year into it. So to see Justin Herbert have those tackles around him, and also to have them kind of piggybacking off of each other, where the big years of Rashawn Slater's contract are going to hit while you're still only having to pay Joe Alt a very reasonable salary, I think that sets up nicely for them as well. But fittingly, we also got to see Zion Johnson in his first padded practice at center over the weekend. But the bigger news was Greg Roman saying that Andre James has entered the starting center conversation. We're getting into all that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. This episode is brought to you by Yahoo Fantasy, because fantasy football is back. Fire up the group chat, get your draft board ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions we live for. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy, and this year, me and David and the Locked On Chargers podcast are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. This is about the time that you find out which fantasy party is going to have the best buffalo chicken dip or, the best salt and pepper chicken wings, and you hunker down and make sure you're doing it with Yahoo Fantasy. It's what I've switched to over the last several years, and it's so much better. And to celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins on August 4th. Stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. And let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. David, that isn't all we have from over the weekend, because we did have 2 practices that have happened since we last talked to you guys. And I think that there's a lot that came out of it, but what we had our eyes on and what we were excited to see was what is going to happen with this center battle. There really had been no movement over the first, week and a half of practices. And now there's definitely some movement, because not only did we see Zion in his first padded practice, which was up and down as to be expected, but we also heard from Greg Roman that a certain player is getting some of the recognition that we hoped he would be able to get, especially at this time of the year. And that is Andre James, David, because kind of unsolicited, kind of unprompted, Greg Roman, when talking about the center position and actually being specifically asked about Zion Johnson and also Bradley Bozeman fighting for that battle, he said, and he quotes, he's elevated himself into the mix as well, talking about Andre James. And it felt like in that moment that our prayers were answered a little bit. All we hoped was that Andre James would get a chance. And all of the talk that we heard throughout the offseason leading up felt like he didn't have one, and it was a foregone conclusion. So to hear, the angels singing and for that to come down from the heavens was pretty good to hear.
It was fantastic to hear. It was something that we were just waiting to see if he was ever going to really be given a true opportunity, just a chance to be able to throw his hat in the ring, because it always felt like he had been relegated to being the backup. But now it seems like the tides have turned a little bit. It's not just Bradley Bozeman, it's not just Zion Johnson, and he kind of elaborated a little bit as to why he is now being considered. He said he's doing a better job with the calls, running the offensive line as a new guy coming in. He was a little bit behind the other guys who have been in the system for a year, but also his presence and his physicality. He does some good instinctual things too. He absolutely does. This is a guy that has performed at a high level starting in the NFL. And so I felt like it was only natural for him to at least be given an opportunity to see what he looks like being in the middle of the offensive line, being the commander of that offensive line. And it seems like he's doing some positive things. So hopefully that continues and we have a true, real competition on our hands.
Yeah, and I mean, even thinking back to the Chargers when they signed Bradley Bozeman, right? The hope was that he could bounce back and tap into a form that he had only a couple of seasons before. And we're talking about with Andre James, that season being only 2023, only a couple of years ago, where he had a better season than any, Zion Johnson or Bradley Bozeman has had at the center position. And then last year with a coaching change, with a little bit of turmoil, he tanked a little bit and, killed whatever value he had in the free agency, market. And now got, a chance to tag along, a chance to, potentially have a chance. And at least now it feels like he does have one, because I think even on his worst day, he's the best pass protector, period, out of that group, because he's just done it already at a higher level than either of those guys has at either of the positions they've played. But the bigger question was, the physicality. Like, it feels like if he doesn't tank your running game and he's still giving you so much of an improvement in the passing game, he should be that guy. So, yes, it's great. I want to see more of Zion Johnson at center, and we'll see how that works out. But this dude had to at least be a potential option, and it feels like at least that is the case. But Zion Johnson is still going to have a great chance to kind of, make his best case. But it didn't necessarily feel like that, because it felt like they were hiding him from us a little bit. The Chargers were rotating left guard and center between Bradley Bozeman and Zion Johnson. But the problem was the rotation kept putting Bradley Bozeman in the padded practices and Zion Johnson in the unpadded practices for when they played center. We finally got to see Zion Johnson in Saturday. They messed up the rotation a little bit, or at least changed it, and we got to see what it looked like when Zion Johnson actually had closer to live bullets coming at him.
Yeah, and to be expected, it was inconsistent, right? Had some positive things, had some negative things, and so, and for him, I think one thing that was not surprising for me is, they really got him on the move a lot. They wanted to get him, pulling, moving in, getting him out in space, which is something that he did quite a lot as a guard, and seemed like they want to continue that trend as a center. And maybe that's a way just to get him acclimated, get him comfortable. He had a couple of instances where he stood up well in pass protection, and others, like against Otito Obonya, who beat him with the swim move, according to Daniel Popper of The Athletic. Some things to be able to work on, but you needed this data. You needed this information so that you know where your jumping off point is, where your competency is, and how you need to make adjustments to get better from here.
Yeah, and I mean, Daniel Popper did a really good job detailing almost every single, first team rep that he had on Saturday at practice. But the gist of it was, very up and down. I think the most concerning part was that Popper basically said that the parts he was struggling the most with at center were kind of the same things he was really struggling with at guard. So it's not a surprise by any means, but at the same time, you need all those reps. And we're talking about 2 weeks into training camp before we're actually getting to see it for the first time. We don't know how much he's going to play in the preseason, but you needed this. And I did think that, getting penalized, not great, having a false start when you're the guy snapping it, not great. Were some up and down moments, not identifying certain stunts, just getting beat. It feels like a swim move is his kryptonite to some extent. It feels like it's always a swim move that gets him. But there are also some very encouraging moments. Per Daniel Popper, said, hey, he stonewalled Troy Dye in the running game, pulling and just, having a violent collision there. And that's something he can bring to the table. They tell you how much they love the physicality of him all the time. And had another one where he combined with Jared Patterson to pick up a blitz, both of them stopping a would-be blitzer and giving Justin Herbert a great amount of time to complete a pass. So this is good. We've talked about before, one thing that one of our callers brought up, like a month ago, maybe even longer than that, was just that getting this experience at center could potentially even, help him at guard. And he spoke to that as well, saying playing center can help me become even a better guard. He said literally that same thing. But we still have to see him start to pick up those stunts, be able to see him hopefully eliminate what his biggest weaknesses were at guard, and also be able to kind of learn how to snap and do all the other things that come along with being a great center.
Yeah, it's going to be a big undertaking for sure, but I do feel like the cross training is going to be extremely valuable, no matter if he is the starting center or if he's going back to guard, which may seem like, that's a possibility now that Andre James is a part of the conversation. That's not a bad thing, because, hey, if you really want to be able to truly play offensive line, especially interior offensive line at a high level, knowing what the person next to you is doing and what their responsibilities are and what they need to do should only heighten your ability to handle your responsibilities as well. And that's where you kind of find that chemistry, that unspoken amount of chemistry where the best offensive lines in the world are able to communicate without saying any words. It's because of that repetition and being able to truly understand what the player next to you is doing. Offensive line is a very intellectual position. There's a lot of moving parts. You have to have some very, very intelligent guys to be able to play this position and this position group at a high level.
Yeah, and obviously, the Chargers coaching staff as a whole has really elevated the roster and did last year to have the season that they had. And I'm not going to question that, but I do think that if they really want Zion to compete at center, right, if they really want to give Andre James the best chance to potentially even take that spot, like, it shouldn't be as much Bradley Bozeman at center. Like, we know, to me, it doesn't need to be a rotation, because you know what you have in Bradley Bozeman at center, right? You know what you have from Zion Johnson at left guard. Like, I think if you went the next 2 or 3 weeks and just played Zion at center and then decided, 2 or 3 weeks before the season that, okay, it's not working, you put him back at left guard, I don't think the acclimation period will be that crazy, right? Like, I think he could probably slip in and still give you a similar play at left guard that he did last season at the very least, hopefully even better because all the center experience. I don't need to see Bradley Bozeman playing center at training camp, right? If Zion isn't getting the first team reps and those are going to even Andre James, Give him second team reps at center and you know, swap those two dudes back and forth to see which one of them can be your starting center. If neither of them takes it, you know what you have in Bradley Bozeman. So just a small tinkering that I would have, you know, just to give these guys the most reps. Because even in Zion's press conference last week, he's like, I just need reps, right? It almost seemed like a little subtle kind of jab at them where it's like, hey, I need those reps. And at that point, he really had none. So it'll be interesting to see how this kind of continues. We're going to get a much better look at it in the preseason, and hopefully we see a fair amount of Zion Johnson and also Andre James in the preseason at center to see if either one of those guys can get a stranglehold on that position. But one of the other guys who stood out at training camp over the weekend was Derius Davis, who hates to be called a special teams player only. We're going to talk about him. Oronde Gadsden continuing to surprise, and one undrafted defender that's starting to make some waves, and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to the ball game with family or friends? Maybe it's a game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, and merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you, because Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, which I love, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying tickets. I know for me, when I took my dad for his 60th birthday, I intentionally waited to watch the prices of my tickets go down to where I got a great deal when me and, you know, 5 other members of my family and the baby ended up going to the Padre game. But you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. But again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. David, we still have a lot to get into because there were 2 practices we didn't get to cover over the weekend, and there was one guy that definitely made waves offensively over the weekend, and it was Derius Davis, the standout all-pro return man, is trying to show that he is more than that, and this isn't the first time we've had that conversation, but he continues to kind of make splash plays, David, and it feels like it's getting to become harder and harder to kind of ignore what his role could be on this offense. But I do want to thank everyone for making us your first listen. If you guys need a second listen, make sure to check out Locked On Bets. Betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rogers have daily MLB locks and can't miss football futures. Find Locked On Bets on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. David, let's get to Derius Davis, DD, the lightning bug himself. 3 touchdowns at Saturday's practice, and this man definitely is trying to earn a role on this offense.
He most certainly is, and I know that the Chargers coaching staff are definitely tantalized by the speed. They want to be able to figure out how to mold that speed to where it's not just speed on the field, it's trained and very, very special speed that can be honed in on. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to figure out how to make him a complete wide receiver, and he's making waves. According to Coach Harbaugh, he's showing up in a big way. We know what he can do on teams, but I'm talking about as a receiver. He's a legitimate weapon on offense. Very pleased with the way he is playing, and if he can figure it out as a route runner, he is special in the open field, Daniel. I mean, you just get him the football field with a couple of blockers. He's hard to see, and he's impossible to catch. If he gets just a little crease, he can take it the distance every single time.
You're absolutely right, and we've seen it, right? I mean, last preseason, he lit things up for, 80-yard touchdown round and end around. All of a sudden, he's there, and then he's gone. He is a player that Sanjay Lal told us a couple months ago, right? Like, we're really, like you said, trying to just hone that speed and find out how we can use it for this offense. And I think in an offense that kind of has a lot of moving parts right now and kind of a stock chart that's constantly up and down with different of these, young receivers making plays on different days.
Yeah.
There's potentially a lot of snaps that are up for grabs, but it's hard to say that, trying to find a role for a dude that even at his size has the type of speed, has the type of game-breaking, ability that he has, that you're not going to try to use him more. I think the hard thing is just he's never had more than 2 receptions in a game, right? So it's hard to know
how many snaps can you give him?
How serious to kind of take this, but we did see him start to come on towards the end of last season. Did have, the touchdown in the Denver game will be my favorite of his touchdowns, but a touchdown in 2 of his last 3 games, and then had 3 touchdowns on Saturday's practice. So he is going to always fight and fight and fight to show that he's more than just a special teams guy and he can make the roster without playing receiver at all. But this is still good to see as a potential kind of, wild card to this offense. But speaking of which, Oronde Gadsden continued to impress over the weekend, David, making big plays. And it feels like right now, not only has he been, easily the best kind of receiving tight end on the roster as far as how consistently he's been able to kind of show up on these practice reports, but also the most explosive kind of offensive player seemingly they've had at practice.
Which is extremely exciting. I think we all know what Justin Herbert can do with a good tight end, and Oronde Gadsden has real, true receiving skills. And according to, the practice notes, he was able to pull off a double move in teams against none other than the tight end eraser himself, Derwin James, and was able to make a big catch off of that. And also later on was able to run a very smooth, deep cross and pick up another explosive play throughout the air. And that is awesome. I just can't wait to see this guy in the offense. If he's able to figure it out just even a little bit as a blocker, it's going to help him, but I think he's going to be on the field anyway. You make plays like this on a consistent basis, you're going to be on the field no matter what, because they want to add that element to this offense. And just imagine, a guy with this ability to be able to torch the middle of the football field along with Ladd McConkey, just another guy to be able to take energy and attention away from Ladd is going to open things up. And they're going to be able to spread the ball around, and they're not going to be able to just zone in on a racing Ladd because Oronde is going to be out there making plays on his own.
Yeah, you're going to get notice taken of you if you start beating Derwin James at practice for big plays, right? Especially, like you said,
Yes.
someone who played so well against tight ends last year and is always up for that challenge and is never taking a play off. But your point, I've talked about it many times, right? It's like Darren Waller exists. Like a lot of the great receiving tight ends in the NFL are not great blockers, but kind of like Derius Davis, right? Where you have Greg Roman saying he's really becoming a route runner before he was just a speed guy. Oronde Gadsden's going to have to continue to kind of be like, hey, I'm not a wide receiver. I'm a full-blown tight end.
Yeah.
And have to work for that. So it was great to see Daniel Popper last week commending some of the blocking efforts that Oronde Gadsden had. But to your point, this is what Jim Harbaugh said about him blocking. Super willing. There have been players who have made the receiver to tight end transition who are just unwilling to block, conscientious objectors to blocking. That is not OG. He also said the best tight ends are elite at one or the other usually. He said if he's really a good pass catcher and gets separation and gets open, yeah, he can do that even if he did very little as a blocker. So he's telling you he'll have a role. I think we've seen it. It's just more about Greg Roman's offense and how, much of an impact player you can be if you can't block. But I think he'll be able to block better than people think. And that is the truth. If he's a great receiving option, the blocking is a bonus. But I do want to shout out one kind of underrated player from camp so far, somebody who's put his name on our map for sure, and that is undrafted free agent cornerback Nikko Reed, who we talked about. Oronde Gadsden, you start making big plays over Derwin James, you're going to get noticed. If you're Nikko Reed and you pick off Justin Herbert twice in 3 practices, now you're squarely, David, on the block of guys we are keeping an eye on firmly.
Yeah, no question, especially when one of those guys that he's covering is none other than the number 1 wide receiver on the team, Ladd McConkey. So that is special. And this is what it takes. It takes opportunities with injuries, guys that are not on the field, like a Dante Jackson and Tareep Still, who are not on the football field right now, nursing some injuries. It means opportunity for somebody else to step up and maybe be able to force their way onto the roster. And so Nikko Reed doing everything he possibly can so far in training camp, making a name for himself. You turn the football over, you get the ball back to your offense, that means you are going to very much increase your chances of making a 53-man roster.
And at this time of the season, I think Daniel Popper said it best where he said, actions speak a lot louder than words as far as what the Chargers are telling you and what they're actually showing you with their rotations. And with Dante Jackson leaving practice early on Saturday and Tareep still missing practice as he continues to work back through whatever he's working through, according to Jim Harbaugh, Nikko Reed got first team snaps with the starting defense as an undrafted free agent. So now it's a numbers game, right? But he's definitely outplayed Triquez Bridges so far during this camp, and is very much in line for a training or a practice squad spot right now already. Might be able to even lock that in. But maybe he pushes for more than that, and it is just going to be a numbers game, right? Cam Hart, Tareep Still, Dante Jackson, Benjamin St. Juste, Jasir Taylor, Dean Leonard, all those
Yeah, a lot
guys
of
have
guys
proven
there.
something. Can he crack that top 6? And a lot of that's probably going to have to do with special teams value, because we know the guys at the end of the roster are bringing a ton of it. But yeah, you get a pick 6 off Justin Herbert. You get another interception, a couple days before that, or, a couple days after that, covering Ladd McConkey. Yeah, you're going to turn some heads. And I mean, it will be someone that should get a ton of run in the preseason. So we're going to have a much bigger sample size to kind of judge him off of. But this is great, right? Like, this team, you could tell in undrafted free agency went in a numbers game, right? You took a 7th round pick as a corner, brought in 4 more undrafted free agent corners. They're trying to find gems, leaving no stone unturned. Nikko Reed showing, hey, maybe I could be one of those guys. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. The good news is we're getting back on schedule with a game coming up this week, guys. The Chargers play football on Thursday night in the Hall of Fame game. We're stoked about it, but that also means it's a game week. And tomorrow is Buy or Sell Tuesday, getting into the biggest Chargers storylines and overreactions. So to make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as hitting us up at Locked On LAC on Twitter to give us your buy or sell. Hitting us up at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, or Locked On Chargers Facebook page, or any of, the YouTube comments or YouTube posts that we put out. Or you guys can call into the voicemail line at 323-524-7924 if you guys want to get your voice on the Locked On Chargers podcast. Leave us a 30-second question or buy or sell, and that's one of the best ways you can get on the show. But make sure you guys are back here tomorrow for the latest at Chargers training camp, and also Buy or Sell Tuesday. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.